Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Jean-François, please, can you start? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria Grazia. And I'm very pleased to be here this morning with all of you. And thank you for the invitation to speak about open access in the frame of this framework of the UNITA group of universities. My name is Jean-François Lutz. I am a librarian at the Université de Lorraine. It's in the northern part of France. And I am in charge of research support services. This is mainly open science projects and realizations. And I am also involved in at the French level in several working groups regarding open access, open publishing, and at the European level as well. So I had an exchange with Maria Grazia previous to this talk, and so she told me that you already had some discussions and some webinars regarding open access, especially the repositories, the open repositories, so I will not talk about that at all, and I will focus mainly my talk about two hot topics regarding open access, which are transformative agreements. What are called transformative agreements? I will explain. If you don't know what it is, I will explain it to you, and also what is called diamond open access publishing. So maybe you already noticed that in the open science ecosystem movement, there are a lot of words that are a bit cryptic from the outside, and you have to discover, so like diamond, gold, green, transformative agreements, and so on. So I will dive into that, and so I will try to talk until 11, maybe a bit more, and then we also will have time for discussion, for questions. But as we are not that many in this webinar, if you feel to have a question while I am talking, you can also ask it right away. So it's not a problem for me. Okay, you can just say, okay, here I didn't understand, or you are talking too fast, or no, there is no problem. I will share my screen. I have prepared a small presentation for this morning. Here it is. And so let's go. Discovering the open access ecosystem. So as I already said, it will not be a whole picture of everything that exists because it's very wide, very complex. It will be mainly focused on open publishing, open publication, and mainly transformative agreements, diamond open access. But first, I would like to make a very short introduction, just two reminders. I don't know what are your jobs, if you are researchers, PhD, librarians, if you are working in the research offices, for instance. So I don't know what is your level of knowledge about open access and open science, but there are just two reminders that are important in my view. The first one is what is the role of the scientific publication, because open access is about scientific publication, be it an article, be it a book, a chapter, a proceeding, name it. There are a large variety of scientific publication. And when I ask this question to the PhD students here at my university, the first answer that comes to their mind is the more natural one. It is, we have scientific publication because the researchers, they need to communicate with each other. They need to know what is going on in other laboratories. They need to know what has been tested, what experiments, what analysis, what data. They need to know that. So there is the role of communication, which is the first role and the main role. But then I ask them, and do you know what is the second role? And this is more difficult for them because they are PhD students. They are not all as involved in the research environment as maybe you are. And so when I tell them the second role is to evaluate researchers, to evaluate research units, laboratories, to evaluate universities, because publications is almost the only output of a researcher. In a large number of disciplines, researchers, they mainly produce publications. So it is used as a proxy to evaluate the quality of the research. And this second role of the scientific publication has had an enormous impact on the whole research ecosystem, because now research publications have become, and it is still the case today in some disciplines, really the way, a goal in itself. So you publish not only to communicate to other researchers, but you publish because you need to, because you have an evaluation, because you want to progress in your career, because you want to have a good postdoc after the PhD. So there is a pressure also to publish, and there is the rankings of the university, there is the rankings of the researchers with the H index, impact factor. I will not talk about that this morning. I guess that maybe you know all of that, but it's important to have that in our minds when we are talking about scientific publications, okay? The second reminder is the cycle of the scientific publication, and then we will move on a more economical aspect. This is just a short diagram that shows the various steps of a publication. This is mainly a research article, a review. For books, it's a bit different, but for research articles, this is mainly how it works. There is the research that is done by the researchers, by the PhDs. There is then you are writing up the research article. Often you are more than one. Maybe it's 2, 3, 4 authors. Some papers, there are hundreds of authors in the physics, for instance. Then you submit your paper to a journal. There is the peer reviewing process. I will not go into detail. I guess this is also known. And when the paper is finalized, when all the changes, when it's accepted, then it goes into a journal. It is on the web page of the journal. It is disseminated. And for giving access to these papers, to the journals, then libraries are paying subscription fees, okay? For the paper version, but now 99% for the electronic version, okay? And what is striking when you look at that is that the part of the process, the three first part are publicly funded, because the researchers, their salaries, the environment in which they work, the writing up, the peer reviewing is funded by the public institutions, by universities, by research institutions. The researchers, when they publish an article, they are not paid by the publisher, okay? The reviewers are not paid. And then at the end, the libraries, like my library where I work, we are also spending public money to buy the access to these papers. So in the middle, there is the step of the publisher, the publishing house, the edition, which is usually a private company, or sometimes it can also be a scholarly society, like an association of a scholarly society. And so they receive all the content for free, because they are not paying the reviewers, they are not paying the authors, and then they are selling it to the libraries. Okay, so this is just it's a bit yeah, there are some nuances, of course, depending on the disciplines, but this is how it works basically. Okay. And when we're talking about open access, we are talking about this white spot here, the publishing part. The idea is not to get rid of publishing. We will see that some researchers would like to get rid of publishing, so that researchers can interact between themselves without any layer of publication. Maybe it could work in some disciplines, but on the overall, when we look at the larger picture, this layer of publication, the publishing jobs are still needed, okay? But how can we improve this process? How can we go from a cycle where the libraries have to pay a lot of money to get back publications that were given for free by researchers? How is this cycle going to be dealt with? Okay, so after these two reminders, let's move into the two hot topics that I want to talk about this morning. So transformative agreements and diamond open access. Transformative agreements, this is maybe you are saying, okay, this is something, if you have heard of them, this is something that only is for librarians because it's in the back office of the universities. Researchers, they are not directly involved in transformative agreements. In a way, you would be right, but let's look at what it is, and I hope I can show you that researchers are directly concerned by transformative agreements. So transformative agreements were first, I will define them later because there is not one type, there are several types of transformative agreements. So the first experiments were 15 years ago in Germany, in the Netherlands, and with mainly one publishing house, which is Springer. At the time, they did not buy Nature yet, so it was only Springer and not Springer Nature, but they were already a very large, one of the top 3 or 5 publishing house in scientific journals, okay? And so the first deal trials were made in that period. But then in 2015, the German Max Planck Digital Library published what is called a white paper. And in this white paper, they explained that after these experiments, there is now, the time is good to implement a very large scale at the global level, like an initiative that can help journals to flip to open access in a very, very short period of time. And to do that, there is only, it's quite easy to do, because the way to do it is by changing the way that the contracts are signed between the library, the university libraries, and the publishing house. And all this flipping, this journal flipping, could have take place at no extra cost. So one of the main idea of this white paper is, I quote, there is enough money in the system. So there is already enough money in the publishing system, scientific publishing system, but we just have to change how the money is used. Until 2015, it is used only to pay subscription, but then we can flip the way of the contracts are made so that the money can pay the publishing, the open publishing. So in December of 2015, there was an initiative called OA 2020 that was launched to coordinate all the efforts, and the first contracts were signed as soon as 2016. So mainly it was in the first time, mainly in the Northern Europe countries like Sweden, for instance, like Germany, of course. But rapidly, we saw transformative agreements being signed all over Europe. Italy, Spain, Turkey, United Kingdom, and also outside of Europe, in some in the United States, in some universities, in Asia, and even now also in Northern Africa. So, but there are some exceptions, and France was one of the exceptions, because there has been a very strong debate whether transformative agreements were the right move for open access. So mainly the idea of these transformative agreements is to say, we have waited in 2015. The open access movement was already 14 years old. So the promoters, the proponents of the transformative agreement said, okay, we will have already waited 14 years, and it's not moving fast enough. So we need to have a model that can bring open access very fast, and we should not involve the researchers. Okay, the researchers, they have other things to do. They have their research. They have to answer to grants for funding the money, their research, but they don't have to put their PDF in an open repository. This is too difficult for them. This is that they don't need to focus their energy on that. So with the transformative agreements, we leave the open access between the publishers and the libraries. We have deals. We know each other, and then we just change the way we are dealing, and everything will be in open access. And if Germany does that, if Sweden, and then United Kingdom and all the countries do that, so in a course of several years, all the publishing houses will be open access publishing houses. Okay. This is mainly the idea. So there is a website, Open Access 2020. So this is a rather old screenshot. Now the website looks like that, and there is a focus on equity because it's really actually, it's an answer to a very strong critique against transformative agreements, that they are not equitable because it's only a rich country initiative. Lower income country cannot contribute to this kind of deals, actually. So we will talk about that a bit later. So the transformative agreements have really gained momentum since 2016, and there is a registry where you can look at all the existing transformative agreements. So it's online. The website is called ESAC, ESAAC. So if you want to look in your country which transformative agreements have been signed, this is the website to do it. And one of the main reasons also for these transformative agreements is that one of the reasons was that open access was too slow to generalize, and the other was that already in 2015 the level of APC expenses, so APC is article processing charges, was starting to grow. So we, in several countries, colleagues, librarian colleagues said, oh, we are paying the subscription, but we know that some researchers in the laboratories, they are also paying APCs for the same publisher. Let's say for Springer, we are paying the subscription to Springer, but in the physics laboratory, in the chemistry laboratories, they are all on top of that, they are paying APCs because they want their paper to be open access in the journal. So this is what we call hybrid, okay, journals, because there is only one or two open access articles. So one of the argument of the transformative agreements is to say, okay, we have to contain these level of expenses outside of the library because otherwise it will go crazy. And it has indeed gone crazy. And the next slide is just the level of expenses of APCs is in France that is estimated to be 30 million euros in 2020. And this is also a trend that, so you see that the curve is really rising quite steadily since 2013. So in the course of 7 years, the amount of money has been tripled. So between 2013 and 2020, it has tripled the level of APC expenses. So in a way, this could be a good reason on top of the fact that open access is only growing slowly, there is all these APC expenses in the wild on top of the subscription. So we are spending millions of money to the publishers, scientific publishers, and we don't know how to deal with that. So transformative agreements are a way of containing these increasing expenses. Okay, so this was what was the idea at the beginning, at the start. So how are transformative agreements put into practice? There are mainly two models that are proposed. The first one is the coupling. You join reading and publishing. So the principle is the following. The libraries have already contracts with the publishers for subscription, so for reading rights in a way. And on top of these reading rights, then you add a publishing right. So this publishing right gives you the possibility, or then it's not a possibility, it's automatic, that for all the papers that have been published with this publisher, where you have the contract with, all the papers where the corresponding author is affiliated with the institution. So for instance, University of Torino, if a paper where the first author or the corresponding author is affiliated to University of Torino, and you have a transformative agreement with Elsevier, let's say, so all the papers that have been authored by these researchers will be open access on the Elsevier website. Okay, so you don't have to bother. It will be automatically open access. And there are two different flavors of these transformative agreements where you are coupling reading and publishing. The first one are called read and publish contracts, because the amount of money that is paid to the publisher is based on the subscription expenses, on the historical, the legacy subscription expenses. So you add maybe 10%, 20% to this historical expense. And then you have the publish and read contracts, where the amount of money is mainly based on the number of publication outputs from the university. So I have missed the word from the previous year. So for instance, if the University of Torino wants to sign a publish and read deal with Wiley, for instance, you look at the number of publication that has been authored by Torino University researchers in 2022, and then you also negotiate with Wiley an average a price for APC, and then you just have to multiply the number of publication by the APC, and then you have the amount of money that you have to spend. And this second type of contract is not very favorable for large research universities that have a lot of research outputs. Okay. So these are the main two type of contracts when you are coupling reading and publishing rights. Okay. In France, I said that France was quite reluctant for transformative agreements. I will explain a bit more after that. But the first one was signed in 2022. It was a transformative deal with Wiley, and it was a read and publish deal. But since 2016, there has been really a large the idea of transformative agreement have been taken up by a large number of countries, but since 1 or 2 years, we are starting to hear some critics and some dissonant voices. One of the most vocal one is the voice of Wilhelm Widmark, who is the library director at the Stockholm University. And Wilhelm Widmark is also member of the Swedish consortium BIPSAM for research universities. And in this paper that was published in November 2021, he's asking the question, so Sweden has signed a lot of transformative agreements, but he's asking, what is the next phase? Where are we going to? Okay, Sweden has now a percentage of open access publication, which is more than 90%. So he says this is great, but how do we move forward? So mainly the critics that are directed towards this type of transformative agreements is that, on the contrary to the initial promise that there is enough money in the system, actually these deals cost more money, because the publisher, they don't want to have an equal level of income. They want to gain more money. So this is, and they will find any argument to increase the amount of money that is required. There is also an administrative burden for keeping track of the publications, to see, is this one really a publication whose first author is from the University of Torino or the University of Savoie-Mont-Blanc. So you need to have administrative people who are looking into that. Mainly it's librarians. And there are no mid or long-term perspectives, because the system remains the same. The players remain the same. You have the same legacy publishers that receive money from the universities. So you remember the small diagram at the start with the research, the writing, peer reviewing, publishing, libraries. So this doesn't change at all. There is public money that is financing the research, public money is financing subscription and transformative agreements. Okay, so it doesn't change. And for the low-income countries, for Africa, South America, there have been a lot of very strong critiques against transformative agreements, because they say transformative agreements in Brazil, in Mexico, for instance, we cannot afford these transformative agreements, because if the contracts are based on the number of research output, if the APC is high, we cannot afford. Our researchers will not be able to publish anymore. So this is a very strong critique that has been addressed at this type of transformative agreements. So now we can move to another type of transformative agreements, which is called subscribe to open model. It's fairly new. It's not as old as 2016 with the transformative agreements. It's like the first subscribe to open deals was like 2019, 2020, so 3 years ago. The principle is the following. There is a publishing house, that wants to flip one or several journals to open access, and then he asks for the subscribing libraries that they commit to renew and to continue to maintain their subscription. So we still have the libraries and the publisher, but then there is it's not based on the papers with the corresponding author. So in which the first type of deals, you have like hybrid journals with always a part which is open, a part which is closed. So in this model, you just change the journal becomes open access entirely. But the weaker part is that, and this is that you must have the libraries that commit themselves, and sometimes it can fail right from the start, because when the publisher wants to move in that direction, he is asking libraries, okay, will you continue your subscription once we will be open access? And for instance, there is a French publisher, EDP Sciences, that wanted to flip a journal in medicine, and not enough libraries were willing to maintain their subscriptions. Sorry. And it can also fail once it is launched. So maybe it is working the first, second, third year, and then because of economic crisis, budget cuts, and so on, the libraries are starting to say, okay, the content is openly available. Why should we continue to pay? So then the libraries start to withdraw. So there is no example yet of a journal that moved to the subscribe to open model and that yes, made the other way around. There is one example that failed at the start, but not of the other type. But theoretically, it could happen. So one of the main issue with the subscribe to open model, which has a lot of positive aspects, is that we should find a way of preventing what is called the free rider phenomenon. You know, when something is free, you don't want to pay for it. So, but if nobody pays for it, then it's not free anymore. So this is the kind of problem that is facing the subscribe to open model. But a lot of the critics, I just go forward a bit, rewind a bit. Most of these critics that it costs more money, it has an administrative burden, there is they disappear with the subscribe to open model. But the question of the long-term perspectives remains. Okay. One of the first subscribe to open contract was signed with the scientific journals annual reviews that flipped to open access, and they in 2020. So you can see December, February, September 2020. So it was really it's a very new movement in a way, and it's starting to spread a bit. In France, for instance, EDP Sciences failed with one journal, but they succeeded with mathematics journals, for instance, from a scholarly society. So can we evaluate the transformative agreements, both types, subscribe to open and with the read and publish, publish and read models? Well, the evaluation really depends on what are the objectives at the beginning. If the objective is to open up access to scientific content, then we could say, yes, transformative agreements do the job. Because look at Sweden. Sweden has signed a lot of transformative agreements. And yes, now scientific articles by Swedish authors, like 95% open access. So in a way, if you only are looking for opening up scientific content, yes, transformative agreements do the job. But if another objective is to lower the amount of money that is spent every year by public research institutions, then it's not that clear. In a large majority of transformative agreements, there is an increase in the cost. And even in the subscribe to open model, it is too recent, too new to see whether it will be less costly or more costly. So when you know that for some very large publisher, even scholarly societies, the revenue are like they have 1/3 of the revenue that is direct gain, you can ask yourself, do we want to continue this type of relationship? And can we lower, on the other hand, can we lower the amount of money that is spent? And transformative agreements on this specific objective are maybe not the best course of action. And then there is possibly also another objective, which is helping scientific communities taking back control on the scholarly communication process. And if we are looking at that objective, then transformative agreements are very bad because they just keep the system going on like it was before, like it was 20 years ago, 50 years ago. It's the same players, the same stakeholders, the same money flows, and there is no change at all in a scholarly communication process that has been demonstrated. It has been demonstrated that it has many flaws that need to be taken care of. So depending on what you are looking for, depending on what you have set as objectives, the evaluation of transformative agreements will be quite different. Okay. And at my university, we did this job or this exercise of evaluating in order to have an institutional policy regarding transformative agreements. And we did that last year, and we issued a document, a position paper on the position of the university regarding transformative agreements. So I invite you to discover it. Mainly, we decided not to sign any read and publish and read deals, but to support subscribe to open models. Just basically this type of approaches. Okay. So this is something that is not only of interest for the librarians and for the publishers, but that researchers should also have a say on this type of topic. So, for instance, in my university, when we decided to write a position, an institutional position document, researchers were involved in the writing of this document, in the preparation. They were also involved in it has been voted by the university councils. So researchers were really, it's not, transformative agreements are not a technical issue, they are a political issue. Okay, or they are not only a technical issue, they are also a political issue. So this type of discussion have to be discussed and evoked within the policy bodies, the governing bodies of the universities, from my point of view. So we evaluate transformative agreements, and we say that they don't change the system. So is there any possibility of changing the system? Is there any possibility for scientific communities to gain back control on their publication process and ecosystem? So there is one solution that exists for a long time, but which is now more and more regarded as maybe the best way of doing open access, which is called the diamond open access, diamond road to open access. And the definition is still under construction. So we can see the several definitions. I will just show you three of them. Open access, Diamond Open Access is an open access scientific journal that does not ask for publication fees. So you publish in the paper. The journal is totally open access. When you submit a paper to this journal, when it is accepted, it goes open access and you don't have to pay anything. So there is no payment from the author, and there is no payment from the readers because it's open access. So this is, for instance, a definition that was selected in a very important study that I will talk about more in a bit. So journals that publish without charging authors and readers, in contrast to APC, Gold, OA, or subscription journals. So this is how to define diamond journals. Another definition is that it's scientific journal that does not ask for publication fees, but that are led by the scientific community. So community-led, academic-led. For instance, a document that I will also mention, Action Plan for Diamond Open Access in 2022. Diamond Open Access journals represent community-driven, academic-led, and owned publishing initiatives. So what is important in this definition is owned. Okay, so the idea is that the community, let's say in analytical chemistry or very small research communities or large research communities, they own the journals. They own the means that they use to communicate and to exchange informations within the community, within the academic community. So this is another type of definition. And the third type is used among other by the European Commission. So it's an open access scientific journal that does not ask for publication fees, and that is linked to a non-profit organization. So then you add the type of organization. So not for profit and no APC based open access publishing initiatives. So here are three definitions. So you see that there is a common part, the first part, a journal that does not ask for publication fees, and that there are some nuances, some different flavors. But I would say for the remaining part of the presentation, I will use the first definition. I think it's the most common one. It's the most widely used one. It's an open access scientific journal where you don't have to pay for APCs. So it excludes all the journals, like for MDPI, for instance, where it's a publishing house that has only open access journals, but all the open access journals, or almost all of them, they require to pay an APC. And it excludes also all the hybrid journals. But you can, from my point of view, you can have diamond journals that are hosted by large commercial publishers. For instance, Wiley is hosting a large number of journals on behalf of scientific association, scholarly societies. And these scholarly societies don't ask any publication fee. So they are using Wiley as a platform for hosting their journal. And the journal you can publish there, it's free and you can read it in open access. Okay, so I would use this definition, which is a bit inclusive about diamond open access. There is one model, so this is the common feature for, or sorry, I was misspelling some words, open access and no APC. But how are the contents funded if there is no APC, if there is no subscription? Where does the money come from? Because we need money. Open does not mean free, gratis. It means that there has to be money to fund the way the journal is developing and is living. And there is actually a diversity of revenue models. And this is just, I don't know if you see it very well, but this is a graphic that was published in 2020 by Isabella Peñé, Martin Eve, Tom Grady, and it's mainly for books, so revenue models for open access books, but you can use the same type of categories for journals with no problem. And so you can see a very large diversity of revenue models for scientific publication. And when you look at Diamond Open Access, there is one road, one source of revenue that is banished, where there is the red cross at the bottom. It's APCs, okay? But all the other revenue sources like fundraising, like hybrid freemium, like hybrid print, like advertising, like you can use that, okay? We know now a bit more about Diamond Open Access since 2021, because there has been a very large study commissioned by European Commission and Science Europe to better know the landscape of open access Diamond, because we know for a fact that Diamond Open Access exists for a very long time. In some disciplines, it's the mainstream way of publishing journals, but there is no figures. We don't know very well how it is distributed. So this study was really a worldwide study. And just have here's the main, some of the main outputs. The first one is that the diamond model is existing in all scientific disciplines, but in humanities and social sciences it is really dominating. So it's the green part of all the graphic. Okay, humanities, social sciences, medicine, and science. So even in medicine, there is a large number of diamond open access journals. Another main output of this study was that the scientific community is really central when we are talking about diamond journals. So the question here is who owns the journal? Who owns the journal? And the first answer, 41%, is the university. And then you have the third answer is learned society. So learned society it's the community. Okay, and then other research organization, government agencies. So you see that the scientific community is really central when it comes to the ownership of the diamond open access journals. And another main output is that it's an underfunded economy. There is very few financial flow in the diamond ecosystem, because when you look at the funding mechanisms, the first two ones are in-kind support by home institution. So in-kind means that, for instance, you have a secretary for the journal who is employed by the University of Torino, who is working in the laboratory and who is doing the job for the journal, okay, as part of her or his day-to-day job. And the second answer is voluntary labor work. So it's just labor that is done. So not for the scientific part, not for the peer reviewing part, but you have researchers on their free time. They are running the journals, even for the technical aspects. Okay, so this is an important feature of the current diamond landscape. So now that the landscape is a bit well known, a question is how to implement diamond open access. How can we develop it? So there are three main stakeholders when it comes to diamond open access. The first one is the scientific journals, of course. So the scientific journal, who can be, this is a scientific journal from my university. So it's owned by the University of Lorraine. It's a journal on philosophy of sciences, and all the papers are open access. What is interesting is that this journal also have a print version that continues to exist, because they want to be visible in the specialized bookshops, and so they are still printing a print version of the journal. So there is no unique model for diamond open access. So it costs quite a lot of money, but we are also supporting, but it brings also money through the selling of these journal issues in bookshops. Another example in mathematics, also from my university. So we are really encouraging all journals that are based in the university to move towards a diamond model with no APC and open access. The second major stakeholder are the platforms, and this is really important in terms of diamond when it comes to diamond open access, because one of the main outcome also of the study that I mentioned is that there is diamond journals are like an archipelago. There is no massive diamond publisher. That does not exist. It is almost always small journals, small scholarly societies, maybe 1, 2, 3 journals. So it's a very like small islands everywhere in the world. And so for these publishers, small scholarly societies, it is quite difficult to keep a high quality level, to pay for DOIs, to have up-to-date websites, to have cross-referencement, to be in the DOAJ, and so on. So all this part of the work is usefully dedicated or done by platforms, publishing platforms. So the platforms are not the publishers, but they are hosting the journals on behalf of the publisher. So in France, for instance, we have Open Edition, which is a very large platform, more than 20 years old now, and which is hosting more than 600 journals. Not all of them are diamond, but almost 90% of them are diamond open access journals, mainly in humanities and social sciences. There are also platforms in the science, technique, and medicine, fields like SciPost. Maybe some of you know of SciPost, which is based in the Netherlands, in the University of Amsterdam, in chemistry, physics, and this type of disciplines. And there is also a European platform which is called Open Research Europe. And Open Research Europe is a publishing platform where it's not a journal anymore. It's more like a platform where there is peer review. So it's a way of making your research published, available in open access with no APC. There is a peer review, so the content is scientifically validated, but the model of the journal has a bit disappeared in this type of platforms. So it's quite innovative in a way. You can have Diamond open access with the classical journal format, and you can also have Diamond open access like with this type of platforms like Open Research Europe. And the third stakeholders are the funders, because when you look at the open access study, the costs for maintaining the Diamond journals are mainly supported by universities, research institutions. So the funders are important, funders like universities, but also national funders, government agencies, and within the universities, I think that libraries have also a very important role to play to support Diamond journals and to help in sustainable funding for library for Diamond open access journals. So this implementation of Diamond open access, this need for having an encouragement for the development of Diamond open access is really, since 2021, gaining momentum. So there was first the study in March 2021. 1 year later, in March 2022, last year, there has been the presentation of the Diamond Open Access Action Plan. So an action plan that has been prepared by Science Europe. So Science Europe is mainly the coalition of all European research funders. So for instance, in France, it is Agence Nationale de la Recherche, ANR, which is also a co-author of the action plan, but there are in each country, each of your country, you have your own research funders, and they are all members of Science Europe. So it's a very strong and very positive move to see that the research funders want to support and to encourage Diamond open access. And more recently, in June, in May, I forgot this one. In September 2022, there was also the launch of a project funded by the European Union, DIAMAS. So DIAMAS is a project that brings together a large number of stakeholders. It has been launched in the wake of the action plan, and so DIAMAS is a way of putting the action plan into practice. So there are partners in this project from all over Europe, and there has been a very large-scale study that has been distributed last month, and the first results should be made public in the coming weeks. So DIAMAS is really like a solution for putting Diamond open access into practice all over Europe. So it's a very important step. And more recently, I was talking later. So this is a copy of the Council, the European Union Council conclusions that was published last month, and in which the European Union, the Council, so this is the governments of the ministers of research that decided to support Diamond open access, so publication at no fee in a scientific journal. So this is really a political statement, a very strong political statement that we are now still in the Swedish presidency of the European Union. Last year it was the French presidency, so France paved the way for this type of declaration, but Sweden just decided to continue and to strengthen it. And so I don't know if you read the conclusions, but there is very strong wording supporting diamond open access journals, diamond open access platforms like Open Research Europe. So we can expect that in the coming month, in the coming years, diamond open access will really become a very important feature of the landscape, of the open access landscape, which is the name of the presentation. And I am concluding with these remarks. I have maybe what I sound a bit too optimistic for you about diamond open access, because everyone knows pretty well that as long as the research assessment has not been changed, as long as the research assessment system has not been does not go away from impact factor, H-index, rankings, and so on, it will be very hard, very tough to move researchers and to encourage researchers to move to the legacy journals, to more open platforms. So I know that very well. In the same European Union conclusions, there was also a strong support for the research assessment reform, but we know that it will take time, that it will take maybe a generation for a change, but this is not an excuse not to do anything in support of diamond open access. So I'm quite confident that in the coming years, this will gain more and more importance in the open access landscape. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you learned some aspects, but I am also quite interested in having some discussions with you to maybe answer some questions, and maybe you disagree with some of the things that I said. I acknowledge the fact that I have, in my university, we have taken quite a strong stance regarding some of these topics, but maybe other universities have another point of view, and it would be also interesting to have a discussion about that.
Thank you for your presentation. So if you have any questions. About the presentation, it was very clear if you don't have a question, but something, it's not a question, it's so for you the biggest challenge is about the changes in research evaluation.
Yes, because it is it's a systemic change, it's a cultural change.
Yeah.
It's so big, it's so huge to change the research evaluation, because there are some disciplines that can move a bit more rapidly than others, but this is something that has to be thought of at the global level. So there is this COARA initiative that can really pave the way for this research evaluation reform, but it will take time. We have some encouraging signs, some institutions that have started to implement changes, like in the United Kingdom, University College London, in France, for instance, the Computer Science Research Institute in RIA is also starting to ask researchers not to give any publishing list of publication, but only to cite the 3 or 4 papers that are the most representative of their work in the last 5 years, for instance. But this, to get rid of it is so easy to use impact factors and H-index because it's numbers. It's so easy to do that, and it's so embedded in the culture of many disciplines. But it's a bad habit. Everybody knows that because there are a lot of flaws on the way, even on the way the impact factor is calculated. Okay, so yes, I think this is the main. The main
challenge.
issue, the main challenge for the coming years. But I think we will see an important change in the next years. But an important but slow.
It's slow, yeah. Olga has a question. Thank you for this great presentation. Do you believe that associations like UNITA will be able to secure open access for all partners?
So I don't know UNITA. I didn't know UNITA before Maria Grazia reached out to me. So I don't know what are the different the perimeter of your collaboration. So usually when we are talking about, I don't know if you are mentioning transformative agreements or so on, but usually the transformative agreements are negotiated at the national scale, at the national level. But that doesn't prevent you from having projects together regarding open access. For instance, like supporting diamond journals within your universities, or like, because there has been this DIAMA study I was mentioning. It would be maybe interesting to see the results for all UNITA members and to see, okay, how do we stand in terms of diamond journals? Do we have diamond journals? How many? In which disciplines? Can we find some cooperation between our universities on this topic? So I think that for this issue of helping initiatives and scholarly societies and laboratories that want to launch or to flip their journals to open access, to diamond open access, UNITA, an association like UNITA could be very useful. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have not other questions. So thank you, Jean-François, for accepting the invitation and for this interesting presentation.
Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure. So sorry, I made mistakes. My English is not that good, but
no, my English is terrible. No, it's sorry for the delay with little technical problems.
Not a problem.
Thank you, merci for votre présentation. Okay.
Thank you very much. Have a
nice
day.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.